What about our international obligations, though, which we do have?
Nigel's obligation, if he's Prime Minister, is to the British people. Again, we make no apologies for this. Speak to people across the country. They are sick and tired of being told that, quote-unquote, international obligations mean that we can't have borders.
But if we don't have borders,
we don't have a country.
There will be consequences, won't there, though, internationally, if we ignore the obligations that are agreed with other countries as to how immigration is dealt with.
The consequences will be that we actually have sovereignty as a country.
It was clear only Zia Yusuf came prepared for this interview. She didn't have any coherent arguments against anything he said. She just reacted emotionally because she was disgusted by what he said. What about our international obligations? What about this? What about that? What about everyone except the British people? Nothing wrong with challenging people in an interview. That's what she's supposed to do. But the level of disgust on her face and in her voice as she interviewed him was incredibly telling. It was as if she had already decided he was some kind of fascist and she would rather not have him on the show. He said Afghans are 22 times more likely to commit sexual offences. She called that out as false, like most Liberal commentators do. I don't know the accuracy of those statistics, but all you need to do is look at how women are treated in these countries to get an idea. We all know people often bring the culture and customs of their homelands with them. That doesn't mean everyone, but it does mean there is a likelihood of a greater proportion of certain groups committing certain behaviours and crimes. At the end of the day, all these interviews do is highlight how the Liberal elite hate talking about anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. They hate any talk of immigration, asylum seekers and their behaviours, or controlling borders. And their instinct is to try and silence anyone who dares speak about it, or shout racist or fascist at them. As Zia said, the idea we can't have sensible controlled borders or even discuss it because people like her may find it racist is madness. And that's exactly why it's such a massive issue. Take a listen.
A national security emergency. So the first thing that's changed is there's another 50,000 people have crossed the channel illegally since Keir Starmer took power. That is a record. It brings the number in total to 180,000 over the last 8.5 years. That's more people than stormed the beaches of D-Day, by the way, during World War II. The other really important point to make is we now have evidence that this works from the United States. Whatever people watching this program think of President Trump, President Trump has cut illegal border crossings from Mexico by 97%. By embarking on a mass deportation program. That is why we think the country has no choice but to do this. Otherwise, we have no borders. We have no borders, we have no sovereignty, we don't have a country.
Mr Farage teed up the speech he's going to be making in an hour or two in an interview with the Times newspaper, a very extensive interview with the Times paper. And the journalist put the question to him. He was asked about the issue of returning migrants to despotic regimes where torture and extrajudicial executions are commonplace. And in effect, Mr Farage shrugged and said, well, that's not my problem. Your thoughts on that?
As Prime Minister of the country, Nigel wins the next general election, he's made clear his priority will be the British people. The human rights of British people will take precedence. The rights of mums who have been protesting across the country, including in Epping, out of fear for their daughters, that will take priority. For too long in this country, British people's human rights, their interests, their hopes, their dreams have been subordinated and deprioritised relative to those of foreign citizens. Nigel makes no apologies for saying he's going to put the interests of the British people first.
What about our international obligations, though, which we do have?
Nigel's obligation, if he's Prime Minister, is to the British people. Again, we make no apologies for this. And by the way, you know, this notion that Britain basically can't have a border, that we just have to accept hundreds of thousands of fighting-age males turning up on our beaches without invitation and then being put up at British taxpayers' expense. I think if you speak to people across the country, they are sick and tired of being told that, quote-unquote, international obligations mean that we can't have borders.
But if
we don't have borders, we don't have a country.
There will be consequences, won't there, though, internationally, if we ignore the obligations that are agreed with other countries as to how immigration is dealt with.
The consequence will be that we actually have sovereignty as a country. The consequence will be that people can wake up in the morning knowing that their taxpayers' money is not being spent on putting people up in hotels who have no respect for our laws.
And you don't think, if this were to come to pass, that the news that may filter back to this country that someone who'd been deported to, say, back to Afghanistan and the Taliban had been chucked off the roof of a building, you don't think that wouldn't possibly change the public mood?
I think we've got to be really clear about what our priority is, right? We're not going to intentionally, Nigel's not going to intentionally make that happen. But look, unfortunately, there are despotic regimes in the world. As Nigel said very clearly in that interview, and we make no apologies for this, the British Prime Minister cannot be held responsible for the actions of despotic regimes all over the world. What he is responsible for, I'm going to be really clear about this, about, for example, the women who have been victims of sexual offences as a result of people who are in this country illegally, the children who have been murdered as a result of people who are in this country illegally. And then, by the way, I can give you endless examples of such people, murderers, rapists, who are in this country illegally, who then resist their deportation at the hands of these international courts as a result of things like the ECHR. The only way we're going to solve this problem is by having a total legislative
information,
reset.
though, on crimes isn't actually available, though, is it? But on the point of sort of sending
which information is
people,
available?
Because the statistics on actually who commits these crimes is my point.
Well, there is. So if you look, for example, Afghan nationals, and this is according to official government data, Afghan nationals are 22 times more likely to commit sex offences, to be convicted of a sex offence, than native British people. Now, that's not a subjective aspersion. That's not a subjective aspersion. That is government data.
That's a disputed figure, though, isn't it?
And to the degree that was then disputed, there was then a fact checked on that dispute. That is an accurate number. The fact is, we have had for too long now decades of governments who have been willing to prioritise the rights of foreign citizens over our own. And yes, and that's why Nigel said, when he's Prime Minister, he cannot be held accountable for the actions of despotic regimes across the world. He will be held accountable and should be held accountable for the safety and the interests of British people.
What about the internment camps that he was talking about? He was saying that within 18 months of becoming Prime Minister, enough space would be made available in these camps for up to at least 24,000 people. And he said that they would all be on their way home within a month. How would those camps operate? And what about people living locally? How do you expect people, say, in Lincolnshire to respond to the news that there are going to be 12,000 illegal immigrants parked in a camp just down the road from them?
Well, we're talking about a country with 100,000 square miles. You're going to need about a third of a square mile to house that number of detainees in these detention camps. And we can take inspiration again from what's happened in America, where 3,000 beds were built in Florida in the space of 8 days. I want to say that again. 3,000 beds in a detention facility.
Similar to the Nightingale hospitals here.
In 8 days, so it can be done extremely quickly. You know, the notion that these things cannot be done is for the birds. The only reason it is never done is because you have witless, gutless politicians without the political courage to actually make things happen.
Isn't it? Because the cost of all of this, you're suggesting, is £10 billion. So where does that money come from?
Britain spends over £7 billion, at least £7 billion, that's from official government figures, on illegal migration and asylum every year as things stand. That's $35 billion over the 5 years we're talking about. So actually, by doing this, within the first term of a reform government, £7 billion of taxpayer money will be saved. By the end of 10 years, it's $42 billion. And over the next few decades, it will be hundreds of billions of pounds. If we don't deport these people, they get indefinite leave to remain, they stay on welfare, and then they get state pensions.
Can we go back to the question of deportation? All right, let's set aside whether or not they would be sent back to the countries of origin, because many of those countries of origin would refuse to have them, or would actually not accept that they came from that country, because many of them destroy their papers when
Which
they
will be made illegal.
So where would you send them? If let's say you have a man who you believe to be an Afghan refugee, but Afghanistan refuses to take him back, where does he go?
OK, so let's cover a few different points. Number one, in that 10 billion gross cost that we've laid out, there is a £2 billion budget for financial incentives to countries to take back their people. Number two, Afghanistan. There's this misinformation out there that the Taliban will never take people back. Germany has already begun a deportation programme to Afghanistan via Qatar. Not only can it be done, it has been done, it is being done. That even this awful Labour government have done a returns agreement with Iraq. So the only thing that is lacking is a political will to do this. And then I want to say this too. If the carrot doesn't work, if they don't accept the money to take these people back and identify their illegal migrants, then we will have to use the stick. So, yes, why are we issuing visas on a discretionary basis to these countries? And then if that doesn't work, we'll use sanctions.
And is Mr.